I mean, if all your highlights are on Huddle, guys, again, especially in the Big 2-6, you might just want to hang it up. Anyways, though, yeah, this is a pretty big video. First of the roster grade series. This will take us all the way through summer. And no wonder we're starting with a team that might have had the worst offseason in the league. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the NFL. Please like and subscribe. Hope y'all are ready for our first of 32 teams. Yes, if you saw it in the pre-video, again, maybe you watched that or not. Though I always love doing the pre-videos. Again, one before every single, team. But yeah, this is when the Jags roster grade was supposed to come out. It should be coming out on this Sunday. But anyways, yes, this is the Jacksonville Jaguars 2026 roster grade. Basically, I'll go through, again, as we've done for, I think, the past 4 or 5 off seasons. It's been a while now. Again, annual thing going on. We'll be going through every single position, and I'll be grading on it on this scale right here. And basically how the scale works is each, if you think, I'm just going to go back to a school thing. So, again, in school, if you get an F, you fail. And basically the way the way I do this is to make it, again, kind of, the weighting makes sense. If you get an if you get an F, you don't get any points. So you literally fail the position. Like, again, if quarterback is significantly weighted, you get a 0, it's going to hurt your overall roster grade. I try to be very fair with how I weight these. Again, some of these positions are a little bit weirder than others, but you still get the point with it. But with that said, the total point value, there's a range for it. I probably should bring that up. Is it there? There we go. That's what I want to see. This is what we want. What are we looking at? No. Perfect. Why is this on? There we go. Alright, this is what I wanted to say. So, this is a range for each side of the ball. We'll get into this. This will matter more importantly when we get to the end of this. But for anyone who's new to this series, basically what ends up happening is, again, I look at the position. I tell y'all what I think about it. Again, position like Trevor Lawrence, we'll get to in a little bit, is obviously a little bit different in terms of what's going to happen there. But obviously, you have the quarterback position. I say, I don't know, randomly, we'll say it's like a C. A C. So if we look at C, there's C. So there's a multiplier or value equated to that. That's 5 times whatever the value or the weight of the position is. That's 5. So 5 times 5, that's 25 points. Very simple. That means the point value for the position is 25, and the letter grade is C. I take the offensive average for the letter grade. I average that out with some tweaks to make sure, again, it's aligned with this, again, the overall offense really looks like. And again, that's kind of like what I project is going to happen. Again, it's May, so again, a lot of things can change. That's why the earlier teams kind of get a little bit off, but I always try to adjust it accordingly when that happens. But the overall offensive grade is on what the team's projected to be, and also, again, what I grade the roster as. For that reason, that's we get the overall offensive grade. The point value is whatever these 5 positions turn out to be, and that's the point value. The point value is a more raw estimate. It's a more, I think, accurate estimate of what the overall roster is. Still, though, the letter grade gives you a more I think a better depiction of what you'd want to see there. So, same thing for the defensive side of the ball. Same 5 boxes for, again, the point value there. We do some other special things. The depth of the team is something that I think is huge. That obviously is weighted 4 points. The only other position outside of is pass rush that's worth that much. Special teams, I give 1 point for that. Again, that's kind of the weight for that. Again, as you guys can see. Also, big thing to mention here, when you get to A+, I have a lot of autonomy in that just because of the fact that there's certain players in the NFL that are worth way more than 12 times whatever the weight is. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I don't know on this team, but definitely in general. Also, identity. The identity of a football team is what allows them to win games and win Super Bowls and things like that. And again, it's really about it being clear and kind of something that I could really see having staying power. That's why that's worth 5 points. That's usually kind of a fluff thing, to be honest with you guys, because I think there's some teams I can kind of give teams the points they need there. So that's what I'll say there if I'm being completely honest with y'all. So again, all the average in terms of, again, tweaking, all that goes on. That's the overall roster grade. The point value is right here. And now we get to what this range is about. The overall point value is right here. So again, whatever the overall point value, as you guys can see, is C. The top range of C is what I'd equate to an average roster in the NFL. That changes every year. 234 is what it was last year. I think it's similar to that in terms of what I projected out. So, again, I don't want to bore you guys too much. I just want to show you guys the method of how this works. So, the C range is 234 points at the cap. This is what I consider, again, an average roster. So, again, this point value is kind of where you want to see in terms of what it is basically equivalent as in terms of a range to the actual letter grade. I obviously can change that if I need to for the team because again, the points don't always match up. This is again more of a raw data set here. And then outside of this, again, this is still a thing because Patrick Mahomes exists. But the offense, similar thing as the overall roster grade, but again, that equates to the offense. So this is kind of what I use as a frame of reference. It's obviously, again, I can use it the way I want it to. Same thing for the defensive side of the ball. It's very fluid. Again, Chiefs exception always for the A. Again, if they're close, they're going to get it. I want to be honest, but again, Mahomes is, Mahomes, so we got to keep that in mind. Obviously, didn't have a good year last year. We'll get to them in the future. But that is my method to these rosters. It's very confusing. I understand that. All you only know is that you are getting I'd probably say, a good, or I do my due diligence with this so that there's not really, again, I want to show you all that, again, there's something that goes into this, and it's not just like, oh yeah, the Jags are ass. That sort of thing that's going on. So, with all that said, let's dive into this Jaguars roster. Alright guys, and last thing I promise you, before we get into these quarterback position, I will say the position groups, again, if you look at the timestamps, are the same as last year. We have our skills positions in one group, our offensive line in another, which, again, is coupled with the, no, it's not, my bad, it's not with the offense, no, it is, I think. Well, screw what we're doing, let's win the overall offensive grade. Is it? No, it's not. My bad. And then obviously quarterback's his own thing. Defensively, we have two positions. That's it. And then the overall defensive. Then we can get into this. And then again that. So again, it's definitely a little bit drawn up, but that's what I want to say there. Anyways, though, the Jaguars quarterback position. This is obviously something that didn't see any change this offseason, and for good reason. I mean, again, you look at this Jags quarterback room. Again, Trevor Lawrence had his best season of his career last year, which is big. We'll get into him in a second. Let's first start with Joey Aguilar, who will be fighting to make this roster. I don't think he will be. If you know anything about Joey Aguilar, you look back to his stats in college. I didn't know this existed, but I guess it did. Joey Aguilar, if you don't remember, was basically like some transfer UDFA. He basically was a product of COVID and all that, but he was hella unk. He tried to come back after a very crazy season at Tennessee last year, a team that, again, was just kind of a mid-SEC team, which is still obviously one of the better teams in the country, but because it's the SEC, they didn't end up getting in the dance. But Joey Aguilar tried to go back to college like Trinidad Shambliss, which was a landmark case for the NCAA. Again, Trinidad Shambliss got the okay, who I honestly think could be the number one quarterback going into next year, despite him being hella unk. But Joey Aguilar did not get the nod. He had to go to the NFL. Again, was UDFA, got signed by the Jaguars. I think he'll definitely compete to be the third quarterback in this roster, but it'll probably be for a practice squad spot. Now we have Carter Bradley, who, if I'm not mistaken, has played a lot in preseason. But he's never actually gotten a snap in the NFL. He's got that has a weak arm. He processes pretty well, but he's really, again, a very limited passer, which I think is something in terms of a backup quarterback you don't want to have. And again, I think him and Joey Aguilar will be very interested to see who again wins that third spot. Nick Mullins is definitely going to be the favorite to be the backup. He's obviously a guy that's had quite a bit of starting experience. 2018, he plays a rookie. He was pretty honestly interesting to start that season. He actually had some pretty good games. I'm really looking at Raiders-Niners Tank Bowl Thursday night game. Don't ask me how I remember that one. But that year, he kind of sucked outside of that. Didn't play in 2019 as the backup to Jimmy G. 2020, he played a lot. He kind of started okay. Really, again, it was just he had like 15 turnovers. He got sacked a crap ton. It really wasn't that great of a year. 2021, he started one game, was pretty good as a ball protector. Again, he wasn't very, again, really didn't throw the ball on field at all in that game. 2022, I don't remember him playing really at all. Yeah, Kirk Cousins was healthy the whole year. 2023, he played, obviously, that was the year that Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles and Josh Dobbs was there. Kind of a mess of a season. He did throw a lot of passes downfield, which I liked a lot, but outside of that, I mean, there were just so many turnovers. Then the past years, he's either served as the Vikings backup or the Jags backup. He's just a guy you look at. He's going to be able to, produce for you. Again, your offense is going to be productive, but again, that's also going to equate to a lot of turnovers. So, kind of something going on there. Again, I think they still hope they still have Mac Jones, but Nick Mullins is definitely a solid backup. Trevor Lawrence. Now we're actually getting to someone you guys want to talk about here. Trevor Lawrence, I've kind of said the same thing about him really for a while now. His rookie season was obviously a disaster with Urban Meyer. He did not look like the generational quarterback, and that's really been the narrative with him. He's never been a guy we've really looked at, who's really, met those expectations as being the best quarterback since Andrew Luck. That sort of thing. Generational quarterback prospect. 2022, if we're talking about pure efficiency, that was his best season. 2023, that was a turnover-filled year. He kind of had an injury towards the end of the year. Again, it was week 14. He got injured versus the Browns. It might have been a couple weeks before. 2024, I thought was his worst year of his career outside of obviously his rookie season. He simply put just wasn't able to effectively throw the ball downfield, and I think that really limited that Jaguars offense. And overall, I'm just like, this guy's mid. He hasn't done anything. Last year, though, and overall, was probably his most productive season. A career high in touchdowns, and just overall is the most dynamic we've seen him in his career. Again, I understand he had 9 rushing touchdowns as well, but don't want to forget about that. Also, I think was he an MVP finalist too, something like that, or semifinalist, something like that. Definitely the most dynamic we've ever seen him, though. Downfield, he's a lot more willing to do that. Still, though, I think there's a lot more Trevor Lawrence can do. Again, everyone's like, coming into last year, they're like, are we ever going to see Trevor Lawrence really take a step up? He definitely did take an objective step up last year. It's just, to what extent can he go higher than this is where I'm kind of thinking on. Still, though, that season from Trevor Lawrence, he was definitely a top 10 quarterback in the NFL last year. It's just, do I give him a B+ or a B? I'm willing to give him a B+ because I think that season was very, very telling. He won 13 games, guys. Obviously, their schedule sucked. Obviously, that game against the Jets kind of boosted his numbers. But I have to give some sort of, like, could I see him getting this A range for sure? We haven't really seen that season yet. But the fact that last season was the best year of his career, and there was something into that season. Obviously, the playoff game was his own thing, but he still didn't, like, play that bad. Like, that Bills-Jags game, they were the underdog in. And you look back to this wild card game, again, he didn't play great, but, like, he wasn't, like, the main reason they lost, I'd say. Again, they couldn't really run the ball effectively, which we'll get to in a little bit. But just in my opinion, guys, I look at this Trevor Lawrence situation. Last year would probably be on a B- or a C+, but I really saw some stuff last year where I'm like, that is what I want to see. Again, like all these other years, I want to see him take that step up, but at least we've seen something where we know about that. Again, I'm really pushing towards the B, but I'm going to give him the B+ because I think that's what he ends up deserving. And again, I'm kind of shaking the rust off here, but that's going to be worth 45 points, which is a very solid grade for start here with Jacksonville. Now to, again, what the rest of the skill position looks like. Alright, guys, moving into the Jacksonville Jaguars running back room. Again, we'll go from running back to receiver to tight end. I'm going to start right here. The Jaguars do not have really quite even an average running back, if I'm being honest. I guess we can start with Chris Rodriguez Jr. Chris Rodriguez is a guy that is a talented back. If you look back to him at Kentucky, I think that's really where we're going to start. He was a guy that I definitely saw starting potential in. Again, I'm really just starting with Will Levis. He's a guy that he's 26 now. I guess that's kind of crazy. But 2018 as a redshirt, he didn't really play a lot. Again, I'm trying to go back to prospects here, but that's kind of where to start here. He really didn't get true playing time until 2020. He scored 11 touchdowns that year. It was kind of an explosive change of pace back. 2021 was really the year he shined, though. This is where a lot of people saw him as a guy that could have been picked in the top 3 rounds. Again, him with Will Levis, that was Will Levis' best year. And then you go to 2022, the offense as a whole took a dip. Him overall just wasn't as explosive, and I think it was partly because, again, you look at a guy like Rasheen Ali, I don't think that was his name. Ali, the receiver that year, he wasn't really healthy. It was kind of a lackluster year in that, again, facet as well. So you just keep that in mind. He didn't really have a great year. And then obviously the past 2 seasons, Brian Robinson and really Antonio Gibson too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, and Austin Eckler, I guess. Those guys were kind of in his way. He was kind of that third back. Last year, though, with all those injuries, and again, JCM not really being a capable back for most of the season, you saw Chris Rodriguez Jr. go out there and play pretty well. He's definitely an efficient, safe back, but in terms of a starting guy, in terms of what we're going to get in terms of him as a receiver, it's just not really there, and he's not a guy that really breaks tackles at an efficient enough rate for me to really buy into this guy being a #1 back. As a backup, you can definitely work with him, but he's just not that guy. Rashad too, and I really like what I saw last year, but he just doesn't have the vision, at least right now, to be a guy there. I think he's more explosive than I think some of the advanced metrics would like to say on him. His yards after contact are definitely encouraging too, but he's just not consistent enough to even, I'd honestly say, to be a reliable backup right now either. But still, he's a guy who began Travis Etienne last year, which, again, they lost to the Saints in free agency. Isn't really a bad guy to have, but still, again, not a guy that who's really been proven just yet. LaQuint Allen last year, he got a lot of carries, but he really didn't do a ton with him. He's not a guy coming out of Syracuse that was really looked at as an explosive guy either. The big thing with him is that he can pass protect really well and does provide some decent power boosts. In terms of what you're going to see in terms of these duo packages and really being able to, set up some diverse run, or at least zone blocking schemes, which is very important to, the Jaguars kind of maintaining the integrity of the defense. Same time, though, if we're going to talk about this offense being able to keep teams honest, this running game isn't really there right now. And you look at Amir Abdullah, a guy that has been a used guy in the past. I'm really looking at that 2024 season with the Raiders where he was damn near their starting running back. Again, I don't even know how he's still in the league. This is just a guy who defies all the odds. Again, 32-year-old running back. I think he's actually the oldest guy in the league. He might not make the roster, but he's definitely a nifty guy to see. Again, he's obviously he's an ineffective running back, but as y'all know, he has been a returner in the past. Where is he? He's not even on here. But Just guys, honestly, this Jags running back room is just—it's one of the—it might be the worst in the football. I'm gonna give them a D. I think that might be a little bit mean, but like, let's be guys. This is just not a very good group. So a D is gonna come out to like, what is that? 6 points, guys. This running back room is just—it's just not very good at all. You could give it a D+ if you wanted to, but neither one of these two guys are starting caliber running backs, and even then, I wouldn't even call them reliable backups. Chris Rodriguez is definitely consistent, but he's not really. You need a guy in your offense that can give you some juice, and they really just don't have a guy in there that's going to do that at a consistent level. That's why I gave them a D. D+, go ahead, but again, if I consider this one of the worst groups in the league, there's got to be at least some curve to it, and that's where the D comes in. All right, now let's go to wide receiver. This is obviously a group that has a lot of nuance to it because of the fact that a guy like Travis Hunter exists, but we'll start with the guy who will obviously be expected to be their number one. That is Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, maybe not. Jacoby Myers was pretty damn good last year. Brian Thomas definitely suffered a sophomore slump. A lot of his routes were definitely cut down in terms of, again, what we saw later in the season in terms of the complexity. He obviously had one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen from a receiver in terms of just overall explosiveness, especially with the fact that Mac Jones was really the guy from most of that season. And speaking of that, him and Trevor Lawrence still haven't really developed a lot of chemistry, which I think is somewhat concerning, at least as of right now. And that kind of speaks to the fact that Jags offense really wasn't consistent until a guy like Jacoby Myers came in. So, again, I think it is imperative that him and Brian Thomas and Trevor Lawrence at least develop some sort of telepathy or whatever the hell, cytokinesis in terms of what we're going to see in the coming really just starting the season in terms of what we're going to see in terms of those choice routes. Because if those guys don't get the same change, it's going to be really hard for Brian Thomas to, consistently get open and get the balls where in terms of the timing there too. So Brian Thomas is obviously one of the more talented receivers in football, but last year we saw a lot of inconsistencies that need to be fixed. Jacoby Myers, he was one of the better receivers second half of the season last year. He had 483 yards in 7 games. He simply put was the answer to this offense. I will say that 2024 season I think he had with the Raiders might have been a little bit of an outlier in terms of the separation he was able to get. But last year, he was such a big presence over the middle. Again, he's a great number 2 to have on your team. I really love Jacoby Myers. Like he just proved himself as such a good player those last couple games. Then we have Parker Washington. Parker Washington's a really productive slot last year. He was honestly a guy I considered a scrub in 2024. Again, I don't want to. That's just kind of how I see it because he was never really a guy I looked at as being a threat downfield. Well, he's not that. The fact that he's still a yak guy and he's at least able to present something over the middle is something you got to keep in mind. Again, his catch radius has always been a big limiter with him, but he's still a guy that last year was one of the more productive slots in football, and you have to respect it, even though I don't really think he's a guy that's all that talented. Still, though, as a third receiver, as a slot guy, I can't lie to y'all. He's a pretty damn good option. Travis Hunter, he's expected to be in kind of a. Again, he's going to be a DB for them. They don't really have a corner right now. So I'd be absolutely shocked if he really gets even close to the same snaps he got last year. Obviously, it was a very frustrating season for Travis Hunter. Again, got injured. No one talked about him after he got injured, again, in London against the Rams. But that was his best game of the season. He caught his first career touchdown against the Rams in a game that almost got shut out. He was the reason they didn't get shut out. But, again, you really saw, again, he just wasn't able to really develop any sort of consistency in the offense last year, and it's because again he was playing the 2 positions. That's just not something again you can really see happening for at least from what we saw this past year. Again, if you get him in kind of a versatile role, maybe a dynamic guy, will definitely be a good guy to have. And honestly, for most fourth receivers, that's what they will be anyway. So again, you're really not losing anything with Travis Hunter kind of being there. He'll at least give you a 4th receiver production when you need it. And then you got Josh Cameron. I'm not going to lie to y'all. This is a guy that at Baylor, especially with Sawyer Robinson, really was never that big of a that big of a deal, I guess, on campus. Still, though, he's definitely a solid guy. He's got reliable hands. CJ Williams, get out, bro. You can't get open. He looks like a guy with a good tan, though. And then we got Tim Jones. Not going to lie to y'all, this guy is a scrub. I hope he gets special teamer, though, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. This guy, he's been around on this team for a while. He's a special teamer. Austin Trammell's done stuff in the past, but he's also a scrub, and then the rest of these guys just absolutely suck. Are going to be fighting for the practice squad. But anyways, this wide receiver room I like a lot. I'm going to give them a B. I'll give it a B+. If Brian Robinson can develop any sort of rhythm and consistency this year, he will be a top 10 receiver in football, and this is where I can say it. But they have one of the better first 3 receivers in the league. Because, again, Jacoby Myers damn near might be a number 1 right now with how he ended last year. Again, Parker Washington is a really good slot. Travis Hunter is dynamic when he gets in the field. The depth, it really, again, isn't great here, which I think is probably the thing to talk about. But still, they have a legitimate top 3 receivers. That's why I got to give it a B+, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 27 points. That's what we'll stick with there. Now we move to tight end. Tight end for the Jaguars is definitely a hot topic. Again, if you didn't watch the draft grades video, I did give them an F, and that's because they drafted this guy, who I didn't even have in my top, I don't even know if he's on my big board, to be honest with you guys. That's Nick Borkraker. He's a good blocker, but he can't, again, he can't catch to save his life. He's literally, again, the definition of a scrub. He just absolutely sucks. I don't know why they took him here. Again, it was the worst pick in the draft. I don't really need to talk about it anymore. All I only need to know is, again, if you want your back to be a blocker, I guess that's a good pick. Tanner Koziel, another guy they picked out of Houston. This is another guy that just simply isn't any sort of threat as a receiving guy, and even then he's not really a good blocker either. He's got poor technique, so I don't really know what to tell you guys of those guys. Brandon Strange last year, he's a guy that you look back, 2023 out of Penn State, he was the second round pick. He had a bad first season as a rookie. Again, he just absolutely sucked. 2024 was a little bit better. Still disappointing, though, in terms of what we saw. But then this past season, he kind of took a step up in terms of his dynamic play downfield. He was a big-time over-the-middle guy. I still need to see him take a step up to be really looked at as anything more than kind of an average tight end. But you look at this group overall, it's definitely a group that has something. But honestly, I'm going to stick with a C here. I still think Brandon Strange has a kind of untapped potential here. But I'm going to be honest, the fact they have really no, again, real depth at tight end, an inconsistent guy as a receiving threat with Brandon Strange. You know, I'm going to give him a C. No, the depth can speak to that. We'll say a C+. Because Brandon Strange I really think is an average guy. So, we'll say 12 points. I wanted to give them a C, but again, the fact that, again, Brandon Strange is better than that is where I sit. Now, let's go to this offensive line. Alright, guys, let's look at this Jaguars offensive line now. It is definitely a group that has seen consistent progression, and they have arguably the best depth in the entire NFL, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. At least from what I see at this moment. Anyway, so Cole Van Lanen last year was one of the more underrated players in football. He obviously isn't a guy that has been a guard or his tackle his entire life. Obviously, out of Green Bay, kind of was a practice squad guy. They ended up picking up, if not mistaken, 2 years ago. My bad. He's been here for a while. Whatever. He's kind of progressed his way up to being a starter. Last year, he was a starter, and guys, he was freaking damn good. He beat Walker Little out for the job. Biggest thing with him is the fact that he can anchor so well once he gets into an established rhythm. His first punch is also really good. I don't want to go deeper into him, but on tape, it's just simply put, he's, again, a very solid left tackle to have. Again, is he an elite guy? No, but he's very consistent, and he rarely gets beaten clean, which is huge. Walker Little, on the other hand, is a backup. I wouldn't say that's the case on him. He kind of got beaten out last year for the starting job. Again, he's definitely seen a decrease in snap count over the past few years as well. He's got, again, opportunities to start, as you might expect, but he's more, if anything, kind of like a good depth guy. If we look at his snap count last year, again, he played a lot, but still, it's just not a guy that I look at as a true starter. He played some right tackle and stuff, and actually, I think a little guard. Walker Little was their starting tackle last year, though. He's just not a guy that's really going to give you the consistency you get with Cole Van Lanen, and also he is kind of a liability as a run blocker as well. Ezra Cleveland is not the greatest guard. We're gonna be honest there. The past 3 seasons, he's been the guy, honestly, just an average guy for me. He doesn't get talked about a lot, which is good. It's really just because in pass pro, he really doesn't get beaten too often. But in terms of run blocking upside, you really don't have it. He doesn't isolate too well. But again, he's a guy that's very safe to have. But he's not a guy that really seeing, at least to predict in the future, that is going to be like a needle mover for you. And then Pregnon, the backup, could definitely be that. Again, he's one of the more violent run blockers coming out in the 2026 NFL draft. Still, though, as a pass picture, he has too low of a ceiling, at least as of right now, or floor as of right now, to really kind of justify him playing. But, you know, a guy like Patrick McCarr in the future who definitely is getting up there in terms of age. He's not up there. He's 28. Who's definitely been a shaky guy in the past. One of the more versatile guys in football. Emmanuel Pregnon could definitely take his spot. So just keep that in mind there. Robert Hainsey at center. Really have no complaints about him. He was a former, if I'm not mistaken, a Falcon. Or is it? No, Buck. Jesus. He lost his spot as a starter for the Bucks. The freaking, what the hell? The Jags signed him. I don't love him as a starter. He's definitely a lot more athletic than Jonah Monheim, his backup. Jonah Monheim's a guy that gives you solid initial penetration, but he usually gets pushed back after that because of the fact he doesn't really have much burst past in the first 2 seconds of the play. But he's still a guy that will give you at least solid enough technique as a pass blocker, kind of justify playing him. Same time, though, he does get beat pretty consistently power, where a guy like Robert Hainsey doesn't. He also has a lot more range, which is huge for a center. Not really. But anyways, Robert Hainsey, again, he's a guy that has a little bit more flaw mechanically than Jonah Monheim, but he's still, again, overall better player. And then you have Anton Harrison, who's one of the better tackles in football. He's a pure finesse blocker, telling you right now, at Oklahoma. It's been the same thing in the league, but the fact that he's been able to really do a lot better, not letting guys get into his kitchen, has really been able to kind of enable him to kind of stop power a lot more consistently recently, which has really elevated his game and made him one of the better tackles in football. He's really the one guy on this offensive line that I actually label as a premier player. Still, though, there's definitely some things in his game that need some work, and they're definitely developing. And then Chuma Edoga has been a solid depth guy in the league for a while. He has some solid experience, even though he's really, at least athletically, definitely a little more limited than, again, some of these other guys. A guy like Walker Little, to be honest. But I really love the depth in this offensive line. A guy like Amanda Pregnon should be starting in the future. Again, Cole Van Lanen is a very solid player. Anthony Harrison's very, again, a star. And then you obviously have Robert Hainsey, Ezra Cleveland, who are kind of average in their own right. And then Patrick McCarty, who's kind of more of a backup, but gives you a lot of good depth and consistency as a run blocker to, again, play him. For that reason, this offensive line I'm going to give a B- to. You could argue it's, I'm going to give it a B. The depth is definitely going to be there. But again, the fact they have all the, again, really only guy I'd say equated to below average Patrick McCarty, but even last year he wasn't even that bad. So, Robert Hainsey, Ezra Cleveland really, again, equate to average guys. Cole Van Lanen's solid. Anthony Harrison's probably, again, one of the better players. I think the fact that you get 2 tackles that are really good weights this in. You could argue it's a B- because, again, there's definitely a little bit of a hole there, but still, I wouldn't really say that. Again, it's not that big of a deal. 6-12, 16 points. And if we add this up, 45 plus 6 plus 27 plus 12 plus 16, we get 106 points for this offense. That will put them, first time we're doing it all year, guys, in the B- here, which I honestly think is where they belong. And speaking on that, the Jags offense, guys, in my opinion, is just, it's not the fact that they don't have good players, it's the fact that they're not going to be a very, multiple or diverse offense this year. There's not much that's going to really happen with them, at least with what we see right now. I'm going to be really threatened by them. Trevor Lawrence is a guy next year that will need to take a step up. This is where this offense goes from like a B- in terms of talent to like a B+ sort of thing. That's where this identity comes in later. But again, tight end, you still haven't really seen the best of Brandon Strange. Obviously, Brian Thomas can take a step up. There's a lot more untapped potential here that I really think is a big thing. But again, the running back is a big issue. And again, the offensive line, again, I think is more towards a B-, but still towards a B. But overall, this offense, I think, will be a little more consistent than you want. But the fact that it's not balanced is probably the biggest thing to say there. Also, the preface is the offensive line is capable of being a pretty damn good run blocking unit, which is important to say. With all that said, let's get into this defense. A B-, 106 for the offense. And now looking at the front 7 for the Jaguars. Again, the biggest thing to say here is that they do run a 4-3 defense, which means we will be, again, going through the pass rush and the defensive line basically at the same time. Again, it really depends on the team. Also, keep in mind that, again, the blitzing capabilities of the linebackers is also something to mention. Anyways, though, wait, where did Devin Lloyd go? I know that's like the most casual thing I've ever said, but I literally don't remember. Oh, he's on the freaking Panthers. Oh. Yeah, they're still cooked. Anyways, front 7, though, as we get into this defense. I guess we'll start with, is that? No, we'll start with the linebackers. I'm actually a break. I gotta get back into this. Anyways, before I say Lucan, he's been on this team for like 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Everyone's going to talk about he's a tackle machine. That's really the thing to mention with him. He obviously had like 3 straight years from 2021 to 2023 where he led team NFL tackles. Again, that does say something. He is one of the better tacklers in football. He's always been a guy, though, at least in coverage, where he's never really been better than average. Last year, I think that was the case. I think I could definitively say that. He had a down year 2024, if you want to mention, too. Also, a guy that's never been injured, again, outside of that 2024 year. His coverage, at least statistically, was a lot better. He seemed to be a lot more confident in terms of his range, especially over the middle of the field, which I think is huge for him. Also, diagnosing the run has been a lot more of a fluid and consistent process for him than what we've seen in the past, where he kind of had to make up for things and kind of just making tackles in space, which he still does at a very high clip. I think, though, the tackle rate did go down a little bit, which is a little concerning, but nothing huge. Before I say Luke Cox is a very reliable player. Ventrell Miller, part of the reason that the Jags were okay with getting rid of their 5-pick linebacker last year. Well, he definitely doesn't provide you the same playmaking ability that a guy like Devin Lloyd provides on a down-to-down basis. He's still a nifty guy who can force his fumbles, obviously with 3 forced in his career so far. He's really just a reliable guy. I rarely see him get washed out on plays. The fact he's take on blocks and shed them very efficiently and quickly, I think is a huge thing with him. He's a very reliable middle linebacker who I don't really think will again exactly enhance his team, but still put them in a spot where at least defensively they won't be in any bad spots. Then you also have Jack Kaiser, a guy who's been a backup his entire again at least as of last year, I guess. I was actually shocked to see him getting picked out in Notre Dame 4th round. But he's a guy at Notre Dame who's definitely not the fastest dude. Another guy that's very, very smart, though, and rarely is put out of position. I think the strength thing could be a little of an issue this year, but I'm actually happy it'll be in a minimal starting role is probably the best way to put it. Yeshua Abdullah, Parker Hughes, and Branson Combs, at least those last 2 guys, neither have them really gotten a shot to start. I'm actually very intrigued to see what they'll be able to do if they get on the field. Yeshua Abdullah has gotten playing experience in the past and really hasn't looked that good, kind of like a chicken when his head cut off. But that's not the worst thing in the world at the end of the day. So that's what I'll say. Linebacker-wise, I'm going to give them a B-. You know what? No, I'll give it a B. While Jack Kaiser's a guy that's inexperienced, he's still a guy that I'm not really too concerned on, you know, making a ton of bad plays. Again, he will definitely be a minus in some moments, but in the fact they have two really solid, reliable starting running linebackers is huge. Despite Foyesei Luokong not exactly being young now at 30 years old. So a B is what we're going to say there. That's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be 24 points. And then again, we move over to this defensive line. Again, we'll kind of equate everything here. And again, I guess we'll look at the blitzing after. But anyway, Trayvon Walker, he is a guy last year where we only had 3.5 sacks. Has been a consistent presence in terms of pressure. Again, really, 2022 was a rookie. It was kind of an off and on sort of thing with him, kind of a frustrating year. The next 2 seasons, he had back-to-back 10-sack seasons. Well, the pressure rate really didn't sustain that. Last year, it was arguably even higher than it was in 2023 and 2024. And I guess the technically sack production was lower. But this is a guy that gets you consistent pressure, and he has a really a devastating power move off his, again, straight arm, which is a huge combo that is something that has really worked well for him. Trayvon Walker is a plus edge rusher, and it's obviously been a very, very good run defender for a while. Is he an elite player? Obviously not. That's kind of where the conversation of him being a #1 pick kind of, falls off a little bit. Josh Hines Allen, he's been, again, a #1 edge rusher, an elite guy, or at least a athletic freak for a very long time now. He, again, has had at least 7 sacks every year since 2021. He obviously had a pretty down 2020 where he got injured. Again, he obviously had that breakout rookie season, or that's not really a breakout year. 2023 went off. Past season's kind of just been out there. 2024, to be honest with y'all, there were a lot of games where he kind of just got doubled and kind of just like, in terms of his energy, he kind of got spurred, and that kind of really hurt his ability, stay out of the stall situations. Last year, the pressure rate was up a little bit, though. He's just a very consistent guy that's going to give you #1 edge production at the very least. Obviously, an elite player. Again, sometimes. He's not the most consistent, though. But again, he's going to at least get you to that production. Then we got Dennis Garlick, a guy that has been a nifty, productive guy for a while now. He obviously had that 6 sack in 2023 where he was the best player on that Jags defense. Or that Cardinals defense. I kind of forgot he had that 7 sack 2020 season. The pressure rate's never been great, but the fact that he's that versatile and that the Jags use him in a lot different ways than I think a lot of other teams would ever be willing to do with him, I think is huge. He's a very versatile guy, gives you a lot of good looks, which I think is huge. Then you also have Wesley Williams here out of Duke. He's a guy that's very stiff off the edge, but gives you very consistent gap discipline, which is huge. And also, I think does have a couple decent finesse moves that'll work out with him. But again, we look at these edge rushers overall. Zach Durfree and B.J. Green are very inexperienced and very, technically flawed. But you got a really good 1-2 punch that really didn't see any decrease in overall recognition last year. Dennis Garlick's obviously a great depth guy. Wesley Williams is intriguing still, though I don't really know if he'll be a true rotational guy at least just yet. Really love that edge rushing group. But again, now we look at the interior. Eric Armstead has been a consistent pass rushing presence for the interior forever. I don't really need to say much else than that. He's obviously 32 now, so the pressure rate's definitely been dropping for a while now. But again, he's a guy that gives consistent speed to power on the interior, which again influences the pocket. Devon Hamilton, my golly, he's a really good nose tackle. He's not going to do any pressure really at all. There's definitely worse, pass rushing nose tackles in the league for sure. Or not pass rushing, guys that can pass from the interior. But again, he sheds blocks so consistently. I think there was definitely a little bit dip in what he was able to do in terms of influencing, yards created from the offensive line in terms of when he was on the field. But still, he was a guy that's going to be a really solid nose tackle for you. Ruggiero was a bust with the Falcons. He's definitely played a little bit better last year with the Falcons, again, after kind of a bad rookie season. Again, they still cut him, though, because he was just abysmal as a run defender. But obviously, if we're talking about a pass rush, we at least saw something out of him last year. And then you also Albert Regis, a guy at Texas A&M that is going to be a really solid run defender, and he actually does give you some power, but it'll really not be nothing more than penetration because he has virtually no moves. So the depth is definitely intriguing. I'm a guy. I didn't really love him coming out, and he didn't really prove me right. I'm definitely, at least this point in his career, I'll give him a shot. Again, if you want to be all about that, go ahead. But still, this D-line, for me, I'm going to give a B. I'm going to give a B for the D-line. That's going to be 6, 12, 16 points. Pass rush, I'm going to give a B+. They have depth. The pass rush off, the blitzing, too. Foyesei Luokong's always been productive. Ventrell Miller, that's probably, I guess, the 1+ dynamic part of his game. Then Jack Kaiser will not be blitzing at all. So, you keep that in mind while we're going to see the multiplicity of this defense. I think a B+ is fair for the pass rush because of the fact that you have, again, a legit number 1-2 combo that has, again, been established for 3 or 4 years now. While Josh Hines Allen's the only guy that's going to give you elite, consistent production, and even then, it's not always a consistency. He's still a #1 guy. Trayvon Walker, obviously, is a very capable #2. Again, I still want to see him break out and really have a big-time season. Then, again, the depth is definitely there. I like the dynamics here, and obviously, you get at least something productive out of Eric Armstead from the interior. Again, I think, gives it to a B+. You could argue it's a B. I'm trying to think about this, but again, the fact that the edge rusher get that consistent production, you can't ignore it. So that's what I'm going to say there. Let's get in these cornerbacks in the secondary, and then we'll see what this overall grade looks like. All right, guys, moving into the secondary for the Jaguars. We'll look at the cornerback situation first, and I'm telling you right now, it does not look very good. Travis Hunter is expected to be the number one corner this year. Last year, obviously, in terms of his defense, he really didn't get enough snaps to really see what we needed out of him. Man coverage-wise, I think yards per separation were kind of around average. There were some zone coverage looks where we really didn't know where he was, which again kind of speaks to the fact that he's playing two positions. But they've really tried to lean into him in corner. He's a guy that will obviously be an elite player in no time. I mean, not obviously. Again, it takes a while to develop there. But if we're going to be, again, a little bit unreasonable, it'll probably be by, December we'll figure it out. But yeah, Travis Hunter, obviously all the talent in the world, we just got to see it translate. Monteric Brown, I think you could justify your way to saying he's a starting corner. Last year, I think he did prove it pretty well. 2024, he kind of got exposed. They had to play him, though, because he's really the only guy that, consistently was able to cover downfield. Last year, got targeted a lot. I think definitely could step up. Still a guy that can consistently get beat on double moves. Something that's got to change for him. And not talking just about downfield. I'm just talking about variated routes. Until that changes, again, I just can't see this guy really being, again, a reliable starter. Still, though, he can play. Kenny Lovely, I don't care about because he sucks. Again, Western, bro, who is this dude? And then you also have Keith Taylor. Just don't get out, bro. You're just not going to play. Jordan Lewis is interesting, though. He obviously has been a starter in the past. Again, we literally looked at the Cowboys, the fact that he was a starter from 2017 to 2024. Never was really a guy you really looked at too great. He was always a consistent tackler and always gave you at least decent enough coverage in terms of uncontested catches. Never got that you're really going to see premier, at least stickiness is probably the best way to put it. That is the most casual thing I could have said. I understand that, but that's really just the best way to describe him. And then Jerry Jones has his play experience, and Jabbar Muhammad, despite his oiled up, no Diddy, and stiff hips, is able to figure things out. But anyways, I look at this cornerback room, especially in the slot, thinking there's definitely some reliability there. The depth outside of out on the boundary, though, is very concerning, and you're not going to put Jordan Lewis out there. I don't love this cornerback room because of that. I'm going to give them a C+. As good as Travis Hunter can be, they don't have the provenness in this room to really, again, like where things are going. If Travis Hunter is really going to be that elite this year, this will definitely be more towards a B. But the fact, again, they still don't have a guy out there that I really even would say is proven is kind of an issue. Again, I just don't really love the development that's going on there. So it's going to be 12 points there. All right, now we move to safety for the Jaguars. This is where I think that, again, the offseason, the fact they didn't really make any big-time move in the secondary is kind of where I think they're going to bite them. Eric Murray's not a guy you want to see on the field too consistently. He's a very solid backup. He gives you very dynamic level play. But as we saw last year, before we got injured with the Jaguars last year, he was really a guy, you look at, like, what the hell just happened? That was probably because of him. He's never really been a guy, again, outside of some dynamic plays once in a while, where you're like, there's definitely a bang for your buck here. Because of the fact that when you have him on the field, there's always a risk, especially in terms of balls getting thrown overhead, where he's going to be out of position and it's going to bite you in the arse. That's what I'm going to say on him. Antonio Johnson, he really, again, played himself into a starting role last year. Obviously, 2024 was a big-time year for him. First year as a starter. But you look at what we saw out of Antonio Johnson last year, it was a lot more responsibility and kind of wherewithal in terms of his range, as well as, again, with the 5 picks telling y'all, that he really leaned into the comfortability where he was in coverage. And just that overall, I'd say, development with him is something that you can't really ignore. He's got really turned into a guy that, again, at least in terms of the playmaking aspect of his game, and is also just straight up range, where you could justify him being a top 10 free safety in the NFL. Very solid player. Jalen Husky, third round pick out of Maryland. I like him a lot. He's got decent speed. He's just simply put in man coverage. He's not a guy you want to see in terms of physicality. So that's kind of an issue of his. But other than that, he's going to be a guy you can definitely put on the field because of the fact that despite him not being a physical guy, he's still a very solid enough tackler. Also Rawan Lane. He's got some decent speed out of Navy, too. I really want to see him, though, kind of be able to fit in more of a true box role for him to kind of, add a little bit more of an element to this defense. He's still got, again, is going to get playing time, just in what sort of role. Then we have Caleb Ransaw, too, out of Tulane. He's not a guy that's really gotten a chance to play yet. And there's for good reason. He simply just doesn't know the defense well enough, and that's just got to change. So, for this Jaguars safety room, I like what's going on, but again, the fact that Eric Murray isn't really reliable, and Rawan Lane hasn't really gotten things going is also a little bit concerning. I'm going to give them a B- just because Antonio Johnson is that guy. He just is. So, what is that? 9, 18, 21 points for the cornerback, or the safety room. Then we add this up, 24, 16, 36. 12 and 21. That's going to give us to 109 points, and that'll definitely, I think, boost up to a B if I'm not mistaken. We'll give it a B- for the defense. Again, I really like where this defense is going. Outside of the fact they don't have a ton of depth throughout the group, and that the interior defensive line is very thin in terms of pass rush, I like where they're going here. Again, the secondary could definitely use some work again. It's also very thin. That's probably the biggest main theme here. They have some really solid players at every position, but they also have that's about it. There's a lot of depth concerns I have here outside of probably linebacker. But again, that's really what I have to say on this defense. Now let's get into special teams and the rest of the things. All right, guys. Now get the special teams, the depth, and the freaking identity of this team, and we'll also reveal the overall roster grade. Don't forget about that. There we go. Special teams. Cam Little, he's been their kicker for like ever. Yeah, no, not ever. He was at a freaking Alabama, bro. He's a freaking dog. He is. Did he get All-Pro? He's absolutely gross. Logan Cook, he's been their punter forever. I'm not mistaken, since 2019, 2018, 2018. He's 30 now. That's insane. He was like hella young when he came in. He's a great punter. Parker Washington, really good punt returner, one of the better ones in the league. Brashard Tootin, I think, is also pretty damn good. Again, when you're a running back at kick returner, you're always in a good spot. And they also have Ross Matajic, unless they're slow or something. Ross Matajic's been their long snapper a while too. Overall, the special teams unit screams consistency. I'm gonna give them an A-. The reason it's not higher is I think at least in terms of their overall coordination, there's definitely something to talk about. Like a guy like Tim Jones per se is definitely a big plus, but they need more guys like that, to be honest with you, in terms of, again, their depth. Now for the Jags' depth. This is where their draft, being an awful draft, comes in. Quarterback depth, I give a C. Running back depth, I'd probably give a C-. Receiver depth, I'd probably give also a C-. Tight end depth, I give a D+. So honestly, we're probably seeing a C- so far. O-line depth, I'd definitely give an A-. So we're probably up to a C+ now. Defensively, what are we gonna say? Edge rushers, we'll give a C+. Yeah, C+. Interior defensive line, I'd probably give a B-. So we're probably still sitting at a C+ so far. Linebacker depth, I'd probably give a C+ too. So again, we're just sitting at a C+. Quarterback's an F. So we'll probably say we're down to a C. Safety depth, I'd give a oof. Again, it's just because Eric Murray's not that good. B-. So we're probably still at a C. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. So the depth in this team, we'll probably say a C. The problem is the fact they didn't really draft guys that I'm really too confident in here. Again, the offensive line depth is fantastic. I can't deny that. I do think that overall this defensive line is in a good spot, despite you you guys not really knowing anyone past these top 8, but the top 8 I like at least considerably. So if you keep that in mind, I think a C is fair. Or you could argue it's C+, but just again, there's some positions that are too thin for me really to go farther than that. So that's going to be 20 points for their depth, which is not great. Identity. Okay. Liam Cohen last year, he just proved me wrong, to be honest with you. Again, that's really what we got to say there. He just did. He figured it out. He's like, yeah, we're just going to be good because we can be. Not going to lie, pretty fair. But how much is that identity going to be the case this year? As you all know, this Jags schedule isn't as easy as it was last year. This team arguably got worse this offseason. We'll see the overall roster grade turns into. But the 13-win campaign, I think it's just something that's not going to be sustainable for them. And I'm worried that what we saw out of that 2022 team will turn into the 2023 team, then the 2024 team, kind of revert back to that. But also the fact that I don't think they want a playoff team, I think is also something to keep in mind here in terms of the dynamics of things. Liam Cohen proved that he can effectively lead a team. And that's something I got to keep in mind here because I don't think he's a very good head coach. But he won 13 games last year. More than the freaking Rams. Cannot deny that. Still, I don't love where they're going, but the fact they have good vibes, I think I'm going to give them a B- for their identity. I think it's very thin, but the fact that they were able to do what they were able to do last year, I cannot ignore. And Liam Cohen, again, he proved me wrong. I'm not trying to get bit in the arse again. B-. 35 points there. If we add that up, what do we have? 106 for the offense, which isn't a good sign. 109 for the defense. 10th there, 20, 35. Oh, what the heck? 35. What is that? Right? That's 280 points for our first roster. 280 points will put them in the... That'll put them in the B- tier, which I think is where they fit. This Jag roster isn't bad, but it's definitely worse than they were at the end of last year, and that's because of the fact that they did not get really considerably better this offseason. Their draft obviously was the worst in football. That was the major concern there. And despite them having, again, quite a bit of talent across this team, and again, actually having really good ceiling in this offense, they didn't address running back right. And again, some other things as we saw through the rest of this roster. I've already kept you all long enough. B-, 280 points for this Jaguars roster. We'll see where that ranks them by, again, the time this comes around. But, roster season started, guys. Hope you all enjoyed this, and see ya for the next team. Bit of a preview right there.
Second and 6, good protection, pass wide open, making the catch and getting into Washington territory. Tucker Kraft moves his way down to the 20-yard line, to the Washington 20.
Watch the linebackers react to Josh Jacobs. We have two tight ends here. A little bit of confusion in the back end of this defense. You got the safety back there who gets occupied, and that opens up a great seam right there for the quarterback, Jordan Love, to make a great throw. Good job here recognizing that.